Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Very pleased to be here. Thanks to Dr. Ma and Darren for inviting me to come over. Decarbonization in Hong Kong. The reason I choose this topic is that we just have a long-term decarbonization strategy public engagement activity. Anyone heard about this activity? Are you aware that something like this has been going on for the past few months? It has already, well, not concluded. The public engagement aspect is concluded. So it's now up to a research unit in Hong Kong University to summarize all the findings. And then it's up to the Council for Sustainable Development to make a recommendation to the Hong Kong government. One thing that I want to highlight about this public engagement is that the practice of Council for Sustainable Development in Hong Kong has been one of a bottom-up approach, not top-down. Nobody like top-down, right? I tell you to do something, you probably say, okay, but then as soon as you leave the classroom, you won't do that. Nobody like any top-down approach. But for this council, for many years, it has been using this approach. So this public engagement is one of the bottom-up approach where a lot of consultation groups and working groups and workshops and so on has been conducted. I think it's 60 or 80, I don't remember. I was in some of those workshops. So the purpose is to gather the sort of suggestions, queries, and from the general public, and at the same time, we hope to sort of form a sort of a public-based opinion, where hopefully the opinion converge so that a policy will be formulated. There is some urgency about this exercise because next year, 2020, we have to make known to the world about how Hong Kong is going to sort of tackle this problem of decarbonization. So that's why I choose this topic. My background, as I told Dr. Ma during lunch today, is I am actually a science guy, working in the Hong Kong Observatory. My main interest is weather forecasting, anything about meteorology, and maybe climate change. So justice and governance and energy is not my expertise, so you would probably know more than I do. But I think these are connected, so I'll touch upon those issues in my lecture later on. So first of all, why do we need to decarbonize? So for us as an intelligent being, for us to commit ourselves to certain action, then we must understand why. Okay, so what is the rationale for decarbonization? Are there any scientific evidence suggesting that we should do that? Okay, so I'm going to spend maybe 10-20 minutes about this aspect. So of course, it's about rising temperature. So this is not, a chart showing a long period of temperature rise for the whole world. This is for the whole world. Each bar is the temperature of 1 month, right? The monthly average temperature, not for Hong Kong, but for the whole world. So this is global temperature, right? And this zero line is making reference to this period. So we have a 30-year period, which is here. So we have a 30-year period, 1981 to 2010. And then we have a lot of temperature data here and there all over the world. We take the average. So each month we have one number, and that number is represented by one of the bars, right? So obviously, intuitively, we know that, okay, in the early 1980s, then it's below the zero line, which means that the temperature is below the reference period. And then lately, we have the monthly value above. the zero line. In particular, all right, this year is particularly hot, which is 2016. 2016 is the hottest year with the instrumental records. So we have about 150 years of instrumental records, right? So we are comparing here the last 12 months, take the average, compare with this, what we call the reference period. And then we are 0.55 degrees higher in this reference period. Right? So this is the scientific basis. Well, simply put, the world is warming up. And then it's not just warming up, it's also accelerating. So you start to see that, well, we have a little bit of warming up here and there at the beginning of the 21st century, but then it's becoming hotter and hotter and hotter. As a matter of fact, the hottest 5 years on that record are the latest 5 years. So that's something that should worry you, all right? But then some of you might question, 0.55 degrees Celsius is very small, right? Well, all of you sense temperature change, but I think nobody can sense a temperature change of 0.55 degrees. Right? Normally, if the temperature fluctuates by a few degrees, then we feel that either it's hot or warm or cool and so on and so on. So our sensory organ is only sensitive to the order of magnitude of a few degrees. So why do we worry about 0.55 degrees Celsius? Right, so I hope, another thing is about why temperature is rising. So this is a very famous curve called the Keeling's curve. Keeling is name of a scientist working in NOAA, USA. All right. He was the first person to establish a monitoring station at the mountaintop in Hawaii, Mauna Loa. So why do they establish a station there? Because that station, which is high up, more than 3,000 meters high up in from the sea level, is free from pollution, so that the data which is recorded at that station is representative, right? It's free from noise, right? So this is just the past 50 years or 60 years of data. We see that carbon dioxide concentration using the unit of parts per million of ppm. I hope you know this unit, is that it is one of rising. And if you scrutinize this curve, you sort of feel that it's not just rising, it's accelerating. All right, so this is the latest one, up to September, last month. So this is for the past 50, 60 years. Now, what is worrying is that if we trace back the carbon dioxide concentration for the past 800,000 years and show it in the graph here, we are in effect compressing the time scale. Right? The time scale here is only 60 years or 50 years, right? But the time scale here is 800,000 years. Now, when I compress the time scale, I found that something extraordinary happened, which is the rise in carbon dioxide in the past century is a straight line going straight upward, right? So this shows that something's wrong, right? Because for the past 800,000 years, there are, of course, ups and downs of carbon dioxide. It looks like the Earth has a certain mechanism to adjust the carbon dioxide level by its own, because human beings set foot on the Earth somewhere around here. So before then, no human being, right? So it's natural, completely natural. So we can see from this graph here that Mother Nature seems to have a method, a tool, where it can adjust the carbon dioxide. When it is too low, then it will rise a little bit. When it is too high, it will fall. So it's sort of what we call the dynamic equilibrium. Nature, Mother Nature is in a dynamic equilibrium. But can you say that this dynamic equilibrium is still there? Obviously no. We are off the chart. Okay? So this is something that worries us. I used to say that if there is some intelligent being outside the solar system watching Earth, and then they measure using the spectroscopy and so on, and found that carbon dioxide is increasing in that manner, and that extraterrestrial intelligent being will conclude something is wrong with the Earth, right? People outside knows that something is wrong, but we, I mean, in the Chinese saying, 即係當局者迷. We are living on the Earth. We don't feel that something is wrong, so that's the problem. Okay, so that is the reason why we have temperature rise. Now, let me go back to a little bit of science. There are still quite a lot of people who doesn't believe in climate change. Notably, Donald Trump, right? And a number of the Republican members of the USA. There is some climate deniers also in Hong Kong as well, but they are not making as loud a noise as Donald Trump and those people in the United States. So we have to ask ourselves whether we can believe in the science. All right? We have the temperature data, we have the carbon dioxide data, but is that the true story? In particular, about the projection in the future. Are the scientists good enough to tell us what is going to happen 20 years from now, 50 years from now? We have to be skeptical about what the scientist tells us. But skepticism is different from denial. So there are people who deny climate change altogether. But as students, as even teachers, lecturers, professors, we should have a skeptical mind. So the point is that this is something what we call conciliation of evidence. We have decrease in glacier, decrease in snow cover, the tree line shifting towards the pole or towards upward in the mountains. We have spring coming earlier, we have species migrating poleward and so on, and we have sort of a reduction in sea ice coverage and so on. Now, each of this is actually a different scientific discipline. So scientists working with the glaciers know nothing about spring coming earlier, right? Which is basically biology, right? Biodiversity and so on. But all these different scientific disciplines, after studying for a long time, gathering a lot of data, they will come to the same conclusion. And that same conclusion is that all these things which are happening can be sort of regarded as a result of rising temperature. So this is what we call consilience of evidence. Right? So different scientific disciplines coming to the same conclusion. So that's one thing that why science is convinced or sort of given us the best available advice. And the other thing about science is, of course, that science, although it's not always 100% correct, you can ask the director of the Hong Kong Observatory, can you tell me what exactly is the temperature tomorrow morning? He can't tell you. Probably, well, around 26 degrees, something like that. He can't tell you whether it's 26.1 or 25.9. No scientist is 100% about what they say. Even they have spent decades doing the same research. So science always has some uncertainty. Or even for the case of climate science, it's basically impossible to tell you what is going to happen 10 years from now with confidence, with absolute confidence, right? So science is uncertain. But at the present moment, science gives you the best sort of advice, or the best piece of information based on which you can make your decision. So this is a side story. We talk about a melting glacier. So there is a glacier, a funeral for a dead glacier, which is just held a couple of months ago. I think it is in August in Iceland. So a number of people gather around the dead glacier mourning the loss of the glacier. So that was the glacier called the Ok. Ok is pronounced as Ok in Iceland, Iceland language. So this Ok glacier was pretty large one time in the past. It's actually larger than the entire Kowloon Peninsula. But now, what is left is this. Right? So you can appreciate how the glaciers are shrinking. So this is just one example that points to the fact that the world is warming. Now let's go back to my question. Why do we worry about 0.5 degrees Celsius? Well, that's from 1980, all right, 0.5. If we go back 100 years, there is a larger rise in temperature, which is about 1.2 degrees Celsius for the past century or so, right? But even 1.2 degrees Celsius, or 1 degree Celsius, roughly speaking, why do we care about 1 degree change in temperature? Whereas every day, you experience several degrees of change in temperature. For example, in Hong Kong, it can be as hot as 36.6 degrees, right? Sometime in 2017. So very hot, 36.6 degrees. But many, many years ago, Hong Kong's absolute minimum temperature was 0. You know that? 0. So the temperature recorded at the Hong Kong Observatory at Tsim Sha Tsui was at one time 0 degree. So the range of fluctuation of temperature is 36.6 degrees. So that is something we experience on a day-to-day basis. But why do we worry of 1 degree Celsius change? Okay? So this graph tells you the reason behind. Now, this is what we call the temperature distribution. So we have a lot of data in this 30-year period, 1951 to 1980. Lots of data, right? So we draw a distribution, and this is somewhat a normal distribution. Most of the temperature cluster around the average. The 0 is the average. So we have some cold temperature, some hot temperature, and so on, all right? So that was the reference. And the reference is taken from data from 1951 to 1980. Now, let's advance the time a little bit to 1983 to 1993, right? Then we found that the new period, which is a 10-year period, or 11-year period, is shifted towards the warm side. So this is warm temperature. So the entire distribution shifted towards the warm side, right? This is expected because the world is warming up. But what is significant about this shift of the distribution is the emergence of a new category of temperature represented by this color. This is extremely hot. All right? In the old days, well, we still have some cases of extremely hot weather, but so few, so little, that it cannot be represented in this graph. But now it is very obvious that we have a number of cases of extremely hot weather. Okay? So if you look at the shift of temperature, it's just by a little bit, 0.3, 0.4, right? But we have a new category of extremely hot weather. Now let's advance the time even closer to the present, 2005 to 2015. Then this is a new distribution. And you have a significant portion of the whole distribution which is categorized under the extremely hot category, which is, of course, heat wave. We have significantly more heat wave. All right, put it in a quantitative context. In the old days, it only covers 0.1%. Now, 14.5%. So what does it mean? The probability of heat wave occurring increased by 145-fold, 145 times. All right, so the significance is not the shift of the average temperature by 1 degree. It is the increase of very hot weather. And of course, hot weather kills, right? Because we have one incident 16 years ago, 2003. You were just born, so you have no idea what 2003 was. In Hong Kong, it's a very, very bad year because we had SARS, right? We have SARS killing 300 people, I think. But in Europe, it's even worse because 70,000 people were killed in Europe because of a heat wave. So that sounds unbelievable, right? Europe is supposed to be one of the best technologically advanced region or continent in the world. How come 70,000 people were killed in one single heat wave? And that really happened. So heat wave is not something trivial. It is important. And that was the general concept. Now we have another heat wave in Europe. Luckily, because of the 2003 heat wave, which killed in France alone, killed 30,000 people in France alone, the countries in Europe are prepared. So once again, France is hard hit by this heat wave, and the casualty is only very, very few. So only a few people were killed in this heat wave. It's so hot that part of the France registered temperature 10 degrees above normal. So this is very hot, 10 degrees above normal, right? So this is the latest heat wave. But then some people ask, okay, a heat wave occurred in Europe, but are you sure this is related to climate change or global warming? No, we can never be sure. We can never be sure. But right now, we have a new branch of science called attribution science, which is actually, well, theoretically very simple. We run computer models in two different scenarios. One scenario is that we ask the computer to do simulation, and with the assumption that there is no carbon dioxide emission. There is no human being on this earth. So everything is natural, right? Because of the sun, because of the volcanic eruption and things like that, right? And then I ask the computer to do another simulation, this time with the presence of human being, with the fact that the carbon dioxide is spewing out from the factories and so on, day after day. And then we compare the two results. And we can draw a conclusion, the scientists can draw a conclusion that this kind of heat wave has a probability of, 500%, increase in 500% of 5 times, right? So what it means is that this kind of heat wave do occur in the past, it will occur in the future, but the chances of this kind of heat wave occurring will be multiplied by 5 because of climate change. So this is just an extract from The Guardian. This is just half a month in September this year. So a lot of extreme weather. So heat wave is of course an extreme weather. We have other extreme weather. So this is all about typhoons, wildfire because of drought, because of high temperature. We have flooding because global warming. One characteristic of global warming is that it will increase the severity of flood and heavy rainfall. So this is just for half a month, and then you have a lot of severe weather. They are not every one of them is attributable to climate change, but most of them are. All right, let's go to Hong Kong, right, closer to home. So, well, we are living in a sort of controlled environment most of the time. We don't really feel the blunt of the heat wave. We don't feel the risk or danger of extreme weather. Just like last year, we had a very bad typhoon, right? No one was killed because we have a very good infrastructure. So everyone has maybe the wrong concept that we are living in a lucky place called Hong Kong. We're living in a lucky place where we are immune from extreme weather. This is our misunderstanding of the actual situation, because we have a very good infrastructure which protects us from extreme weather. But actually, the impact of climate change can affect us directly or indirectly. So this is one of the direct threats to Hong Kong. Mosquitoes. I think you're all very lucky. Probably no one have contracted dengue fever, let alone malaria. I was very unlucky because I contracted malaria twice, when I was in Form 1 and then in Form 2, because malaria was prevalent at that time. Now, with global warming and climate change, we expect rise in temperature, we expect more rainfall as a result of the atmosphere's ability to hold more moisture. Let's talk about temperature first. Now, in order for a mosquito to be infectious, okay, it has to bite, first of all. So this is the physiology of the mosquito. They tend to bite more with higher temperature. The higher the temperature, the female mosquito tends to bite more. So this is one point. And then the other point, which is very or equally or more important, is that in order for the mosquito to be infectious, the pathogen inside the body of the mosquito has to be mature. So there is an incubation period within the mosquito. And that incubation period decreases sharply with rising temperature, right? If the temperature is about 15 degrees, then it takes 50 days for the pathogen to be mature. If the temperature is 35, then it takes just a few days. So the mosquitoes as a species in general will be much more infectious than if the temperature is cool. So global warming is fastening this kind of process, shortening the incubation period. So as a result, adding this and that together, we have an exponential rise in the possibility of the transmission. But of course, we can deal with that. The government can deal with that by, spraying insecticide here and there, right? But, well, it has side effect. I tell you, it has side effect because a lot of insects, which are good insects, which are positive, contribute positive to the biosphere and other things, are killed at the same time. So there are side effects. This is just 2 months ago, less than 2 months ago, air pollution data from the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. Well, let's focus on here. This is ozone. This is the small hours in the morning. So this is midnight, 1 o'clock in the 1 o'clock at night, and so forth and so on. You can see that there's basically no ozone during the small hours of the morning. But then, during the particular day, the ozone soared to 390. I don't know, I forget the WHO recommendation. At least 10 times. I think it's about 10 times above the limit. And the WHO recommendation is that the allowable exceedance of high ozone in our air is 0. So the ideal situation is that we should not have any, or not a single day where the ozone layer is so high, because ozone is very bad to our health, to our respiratory system. If you have asthma or other heart disease, respiratory disease, then you will be hard hit as a result of high concentration of ozone. And the reason for this drastic increase in ozone is, of course, a process called photochemical reaction. We have some pollutants in the air, for example, the NOx, the SOx, and some VOC, volatile organic compound, which is emitted naturally by the trees, but sometimes by artificial means, by human means. So when the NOx and SOx, the pollutants, react with the VOC under strong sunlight and under high temperature, then you will have exponential increase in the ozone concentration. So we are talking about global warming. Higher temperature is favorable for more ozone to be formed. Just a few weeks ago, I talked to Professor Alexis Lau of Hong Kong USD, and they told me that the ozone situation this year is particularly bad. I don't have the detailed information, but that's what he told me. So this is something we have to be concerned as a result of global warming. And then, good, last year, Sanzhou, right? we all experience the severity of that storm. I don't need to tell you because the social media are full of videos and images and so on. So we all know the impact of Mangut. Now let's put it in perspective of climate change. One important thing about typhoon is that, it's not written in, I didn't include that slide. If you go to the Hong Kong Observatory website, there is a map showing the places which were flooded during the onslaught of Typhoon Mangut. Practically, all places along the shoreline of Hong Kong were flooded. Of course, Hanfachun, Meiyuan were hardest hit, and you have Sati, Daibo, Shatin, and Daibo also hardest hit, right? Something that I've never seen before in my life. Complete Shatin River flooded. And this is something that I've never seen. I haven't seen since the new town was built. And the reason is, of course, something called storm surge. All right, the typhoons, because of the very strong winds, can push the water toward the shore, causing flooding. But that situation was worsened, exacerbated by the rise in sea level. For instance, this is the amount of sea level rise projected by the end of this century. It may not be 100% correct, but chances are, because of the acceleration of global warming, that by the end of the century it will exceed 1 meter. More than that, this is sort of assessment made several years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, after the AR5, the assessment report number 5 of the IPCC, which is the authoritative publication produced by the United Nations. So that was the assessment made 5 or 6 years ago. It's most likely that when the new assessment come out, it will be more than that value. Now let's stick to this one. Mangut caused a 3.8 meter rise in sea level. Then we can compare this rise. 3.8 is pretty high, right? Probably higher than the ceiling of this room. We can compare this value with the past data of Hong Kong, because the Hong Kong Observatory has been operating for more than 100 years. So we have a lot of information data about sea level rise as a result of typhoon approach, right? So we can calculate the possibility of, for example, a rise in 3.5 meters above the mean sea level is a 50-year event, meaning that it will occur on the average once every 50 years. That is according to past statistics. Now, if the sea level were to rise by 1 meter by the end of the century, then a rise of 3.8 meter, which is equivalent to that of Sanjok or Mangut, will be a 1-year event. All right? So something that should happen on a basis of 50 or 60 years will happen every year in the future if a typhoon were to strike Hong Kong. So that is the significance of global warming. Why do we have sea level rise? Because, of course, the sea is a lot of water, and then it expands under global warming. Higher temperature, larger volume, expansion, right? And the other is, of course, we just mentioned, melting of the glacier. So it causes the sea level rise. And then another factor is that if you compare the 2017 Tingap Hapto, a severe typhoon, and Mangut, which is last year, if you have some basic understanding about satellite imagery and weather and meteorology, your intuition, your feeling is that Hapto, Tingap, seems to be stronger than Mangut. Right? Because the eye, particularly in the radar, this is satellite, this is radar. The eye is very compact, it's very symmetrical. Whenever we see this kind of signature, we know that this is a strong typhoon. Whereas for the case of Manggut, well, we can sort of discern the eye, but it's not so compact, it's not so symmetrical. So the first assessment, making use of this kind of imagery, is that Hector is even stronger in terms of wind speed than Manggut. But we all know that the impact of Manggut is much, much stronger than Hector, right? 60,000 trees were destroyed as a result of Manggut. Nothing like that in Hector. Why? As a matter of fact, when you come close to Hong Kong, the central, what we call the maximum wind speed, which is used to determine the category of a typhoon. You know, we have tropical depression, which is pretty weak, and then tropical storm, and then typhoon, severe typhoon, and super typhoon. So both of them were super typhoon at one stage at a time. So that was based on what we call the maximum sustained wind speed, which is the wind measured within the eye wall. The eye wall is somewhere here. So this is the place where you have the strongest wind. So when we measure the wind speed and then we compare it with the other wind speed, and then reach a certain criteria, we will say that this is a super typhoon, this is just a typhoon, so on so on. So this one is stronger than that one, but that one caused a lot more damage. So why is that? Actually, you can tell from this image. You can give me the answer from these two images. It's because of the size, right? The center of the storm is not as strong as this one, but the size is much larger than this one. So obviously, if you have a larger storm with strong winds blowing around, the damage will obviously be larger, right? So in the old days, we judge a typhoon simply from the maximum wind speed near the center. But now, if you talk about destruction of a typhoon, you have to consider the area. So this is what we call tropical cyclone destructive potential. You have to integrate the wind speed, which is the maximum wind speed near the center, and also the area over a period of time. Right? The longer the time the typhoon attacks you, then the damage will be larger, and so on and so on. So the result is that we have a potential, and if the temperature rises by 2 degrees, western North Pacific, which is our region, the destructive potential will rise significantly, right? From less than 50 to about 100. So that is the situation for our area, western North Pacific. This is for Atlantic, for USA, for Canada, and so on. Right? So again, a rise, but not as strong as the case in our area. Drought. We just talked over lunch that water security is a very important issue because Hong Kong is having a large population. And again, you're all very lucky. You haven't experienced any bad drought in your 20 years, maybe a little bit less than 20 years. But I was unfortunate to have experienced the worst drought in history of Hong Kong, which is 1963. Very bad drought. It is so bad that everyone is depressed. Because at that time I was only a small boy. But I can feel the depression of the entire city. Because every day you look out your window and hope that rain will come. But sadly and depressingly, the rain didn't come. And if that happens day after day, you become very depressed because life hinges upon the rainfall. And as a matter of fact, in 2014, when I visited Australia to do a documentary about drought in Australia, in Queensland, and I know from interviewing a lot of farmers that some farmers did kill themselves, commit suicide, as a result of an 18-month drought in Queensland. So drought can kill directly as a result of lack of water resource. It can also kill because of psychological reasons, because of depression. So last year, if you notice or pay attention to the weather conditions in Hong Kong, we have first 5 months which is very, very dry. And this is an agricultural lake in northern part, Leung. This is a reservoir, right? It's completely dry, it's bone dry. But that is May. That is May. May is supposed to be a month with a lot of rainfall, but it is bone dry. So some of the journalists are sensitive about that and ask the question, hey, is this going to be a drought in Hong Kong? So I answer them and say that, okay, this is just the beginning of the rain season, so don't worry about that at the present moment. Luckily, we have a lot of rainfall, particularly and good also got a lot of rainfall. But the risk is there, right? This is what we call the rainfall index. I talked about the very bad drought in Hong Kong 1963. If the index is less than -2, it is extremely dry. So -2 is already a bad drought. In 1963 is -3 point something. So very bad. So you can see that Hong Kong is not immune to drought. We do have drought in the past. Now we have Dongjiang River. So we don't worry about water security. But is that the right attitude? Let's take a look at the science. Hoyuan. I don't know whether you've been to there. This is a sort of tourist. There are some local tours bringing you to Hoyuan, which is just next to Dongjiang. And then you have a very large reservoir there called the Santongdong, Xintongjiang Reservoir. Very large, so you can see from the area which is comparable to probably larger than Kowloon Peninsula and so on. So a very large reservoir. So it's this Dongjiang which gives us the water and then is transported all the way to Dongguan, and then there are pipes bringing the water to Hong Kong. Now the idea of this map is that when Hong Kong has a bad drought in 1963, there is also a bad drought in Hoyuan, although not as bad as Hong Kong. When Hong Kong has a lot of rainfall, Hoyuan also has a lot of rainfall. When Hong Kong is dry, when Hoyuan was dry, Hong Kong is also dry. Well, this is actually to be expected, right? Because Hoyuan is so close to Hong Kong, and in fact the whole Dongjiang River is so close to Hong Kong. Most of the time they are under the influence of the same weather system. So there is no reason why Hong Kong is dry and then we have a lot of rainfall in Hoyuan and Dongjiang. This is not logical, right? So the problem is that if Hong Kong experiences a bad drought in the future, it is very likely that Dongjiang River also experiences a bad drought. That we ask the question of what is security in Hong Kong. And then something which is seems to be not very direct. Biodiversity, laws of biodiversity. This is a very new report published just a few months ago. It's about the laws of biodiversity for the whole world. And this report highlighted that there is a chance of 1 million species becoming extinct. So that is another mass extinction, right? We have a few mass extinction in the past, and there is a mass extinction on the making. And this is the projection in terms of temperature rise. This is judging from temperature alone, judging from weather alone. We have other factors that contribute to loss of species. For example, pollution is of course a very important factor. For example, overcatching, overkilling, right, is of course another important factor. But this one deals with weather, right? So when the temperature rises by 3 or 4%, then you have something like 10% of the species dying as a result of climate change. So I have to emphasize at this point that climate change is not the cause of all evils. We are under the challenge of different kinds of threats, right? But climate change has an important characteristic that it will multiply the challenges that we are facing. All right? So there are other reasons contributing to loss of species, but climate change will add to that problem. So this is a report published last year. If the temperature rises by 2 degrees Celsius, judging from the what we call the pre-industrial era, then most of the coral reef, in fact more than 99% of coral reef will die. So we lost one species, which is the coral reef. Well, actually there are a lot of species of coral reef. And then as far as fish is concerned, which is directly affecting us because we Hong Kong people like to eat a lot of fish, right? So 3 million tons of catch will be lost. So what is 3 million tons? We don't probably have the idea of what does it mean by 3 million tons of fish. Well, you can actually convert it to annual consumption of fish in Hong Kong. 3 million tons is equivalent to 6 years of consumption of fish in Hong Kong. But Hong Kong people eat a lot of fish. If we Hong Kong people, if we eat the same amount of fish as the average globally, then 3 million tons is good enough for us for 20 years. So it's 20 years worth of supply of fish for Hong Kong population. So that's a lot, right? And then with agricultural productivity, which is suffering losses from 12%, 7%. Well, you may have thought that 7% is not a large number. But no. We are very concerned about food security because in addition to this loss of agricultural productivity as a result of climate change, we have population explosion. We have more mouths to feed, right? So how can we deal with food security when we have more and more people and yet less and less food? Less and less fish, less and less agricultural productivity. So that's going to be a major challenge in the next few decades. Unless we come up with something creative, everybody will suffer from hunger, I can assure you. And then health and so forth and so on. And this is the insects, so some of the insects will be gone as a result of rising temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. I know that many of you don't like insects, right? It's sort of scary. But insects are very important. It's the most, well, not most, it's one of the linchpin of the biological services that provide to we human beings. Take for instance, bees, butterflies. If there's no bees, there are no butterflies, there will be no crops, right? Well, not no, but a lot of crops cannot grow because we need pollination by the bees and by the insects. So if they were gone, then a lot of crops cannot be grown, and even the vertebrates, well, which is supposed to be the higher order of the animals, will also die. So we have a threat, a food security threat. And this is a projection. This is not about the present. Okay? So it tells us that the percentage change in yields between present and 2015. So this is a projection up to 2015, middle of the century. So if it is belonging to this color, you have negative change, meaning that those parts of the world will suffer from decreasing agricultural productivity. So it's clear from this map here that most parts of the world will suffer from a decrease in agricultural productivity. Something that seems to be very remote from us. Climate refugee, Syria over there. Millions of people are displaced, and you just heard the news, watch the news that there is a war fighting between Turkey and Syria, right? So it's one of the most unsettled places in the world. But in the past 10 years or so, there is an outward flux of refugees from Syria. Many of them are political, social, financially driven. But those factors are once again magnified, multiplied by adverse weather. Because Syria suffered a 5-year drought in a row, right? So that some of the people who used to be self-sufficient in terms of growing their own food cannot grow the food any longer. So they rush to the city, Damascus, and look for opportunities, but of course, because of poor governance and so forth and so on, is no way out. So they have to sort of move to other parts of the world, causing chaos to Turkey and also to Europe. Now it also spawned terrorism. And this is a picture in USA, many years ago, 1930s. So people are queuing up for what? For free coffee and donuts. So someone is doing a philanthropy, something like that. Some good thing, right? So offer free drink and food for the people who are jobless. Do you know who offer this drink and food to these poor people? It's not the government. It's the mafia. You know, the gangsters in USA. They offer free drink and food to the people. Why? Because they want to gain the heart of the people so that when the police come to do criminal investigation, these people, because they see the mafia as a savior, will try to shelter, to block the police from doing all kind of investigation. So that is a strategy used by the mafia in the 1930s. And then more or less the same strategy was used by ISIS in Iraq, in unsettled places in Middle East, because they are suffering from all kinds of hardship, and of which climate change is one of the factors, not the sole factor, but one of the factors. And then the ISIS saw weakness of those people, and they offer them money, they offer them food, shelter, and so on and so on, asking them to do terrorism acts and so on. So that explains the rise of ISIS. As a matter of fact, more than 10 years ago, a think tank in the US, mainly composed of retired generals of the US military, issued a report specifically identifying climate change as a cause of national security and terrorism. And that was published more than 10 years ago. And the history is repeating itself. Let's go to Hong Kong once again. It's also a justice problem. This is a summary of the results of the research by some scientists in the CUHK. And it pointed out that in buildings, in the developed buildings, in very urbanized places where you have a lot of buildings packed together, right? So you have what we call the high urban heat island index. So places with high urban heat island index, like Shanghai, maybe somewhere parts of Hong Kong, Okay, so if the temperature of a certain day is higher than 1 degree Celsius, the average temperature, then 4.1% there will be 4.1% of mortality. People die for various reasons, for bad health and so on and so on. If the temperature is higher than 29 degrees, then 1 degree further increase in temperature will cause 4.1% more of people dying. Right? This is for the populated or the high UHI areas as a whole, disregarding the socio-economic status. But if we stratify the status according to the socio-economic the income and so forth and so on, then the percentage will rise to 5.6. So more people who are poor, who are living under the poverty line, who do not have a good living environment, will die more as a result of higher temperature in the future. So this is the kind of living conditions that some of us are still living in. So this is injustice. Well, this is only part of the iceberg. And then we have injustice in the global scale. This is an index called the Climate Vulnerability Index. The blue color represents not so vulnerable, right? Considering climate change in the future. So climate is going to change for many years to come. And then this is a computer simulation of which part of the world will not suffer as a result of climate change. And this one is that the lower the value or the darker the color, it represents that those people will suffer more as a result of climate change. So you can see that South America, Central America, Africa, Indonesia, Malaysia, South Asia, those people who are the poorest, who are now the most vulnerable, will become even more vulnerable in the future. So that's injustice in a global scale. All right, we are talking about billions of people under this kind of future condition. So that brings to the problem or the issue of the ethical dimension of climate change. There are a lot of people who deny climate change. There are a lot of people who know that climate change is happening, but choose to do nothing. Ethically, is that right? So we come to that idea. Well, people ask, well, just like George W. Bush and Donald Trump, right? They say that, well, the science is not certain. We don't need to do anything until the science is 100% certain. That is asking an impossible question, because there is always uncertainty associated with science. Science cannot be 100% certain. All right? So if you act until you have all the facts in hand, that is a recipe for inaction. It means that you're not going to do anything about climate change forever, because that stage where you have all the facts in hand never comes, never occurs. Right? So we are, as human beings, young person like you or old person like me, we have to make decisions all the time. We always make decisions under uncertainty. You don't have a crystal ball. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. What is the economy of Hong Kong 10 years from now? What is a profession that I should choose to give me a better life in the future, and so on. You don't know that. All right? We always make decisions under uncertainty. Now, if we make decisions under uncertainty, if the consequence is important or grave, then it's always good to take precaution. And that is a guiding principle for policy formulation. Precautionary principle. If something that is potentially harmful, like climate change, like global warming, then it is better for us to take action despite we don't know exactly that climate change is going to be that worse in the future, right? So, 買保險啫. That is the right policy. So, expanding on this precautionary principle, then Garvey, which is some expert who deal with the ethics of climate change, you say that if someone says that science is uncertain, so we wait and see, then it is equivalent to gambling with the life of people. If someone says that the cost of mitigation is too high, we shouldn't do anything, then again it is vicious. If we should wait for a technological fix, because after all, human beings are very intelligent, we can create technology, we can solve all the problems. But before that technology is operational, is available, we cannot depend on it. So if we have this kind of thought, it's reckless. So all this put together justify aggressive actions on climate change. So someone say that the climate change is like a perfect moral storm. You know, perfect storm is a book telling the story of a guy who sailed across the Atlantic or Pacific, I don't know where, and he experienced waves up to more than 100 feet of height, gigantic wave. And that didn't occur most of the time. It's rare, only on rare occasions that this kind of wave occurs. It is the coincidence of a number of factors. For example, I have a storm here, storm there, and storm there. And the storms send out wave in all directions, and then when they meet, they will have constructive interference. So the wave will step one upon the other, creating a gigantic wave. So this is a perfect storm. But for climate change, it's a perfect moral storm because of three reasons. One is that the least responsible are likely to suffer the most, like what I discussed, right? In Hong Kong, the poorest people will suffer the most, will die, more of them will die, and also the same for the whole world. The victims cannot hold us accountable. You and I are responsible for climate change because every piece of clothes that we buy, every meal that we consume, every trip that we take to other countries involve carbon dioxide generation, and it will cause climate change to become worse. So we are all accountable, but some of them cannot hold us accountable because some of them are very poor. Poor people do not have a voice, are not vocal. Some of them are not yet born. We are talking about the next generation and the generation after next. How can they accuse we in the current generation of doing something bad or not doing anything while we have the ability to do so? And then some of them are non-human. Right? You talk to the species. You have different species who are facing the threats of extinction. They cannot make a voice. And then most importantly, the current institution is not capable of dealing with a problem or challenge like climate change, which is multifaceted, which is cross-disciplinary. Right? So it is, we don't have an institution to do that. So this is a perfect moral storm. So I have to rush. I don't think I have a lot of time, right? So I'll rush a little bit. So talking about the last point is about governance. Climate change is a problem which is very difficult to deal with because it needs collaboration. But you know that this world, particularly in the international arena, we have a deep schism between one country and the other country. We are competing against one another. For example, China and US. They are under conflict because of the trade war. Right? They want to gain economically. So they are enemies. They have a wide schism between them. How can you expect China and US to cooperate in solving climate change, right? And also climate change is very special in the sense that it is public goods. What is public goods? Probably Dr. Mao will tell you in a lecture. Right? Something that if I enjoy good climate, then I am not depriving the opportunity of other people in the world to enjoy the same good climate. So this is public goods. So for public goods, because it is a problem of all people in the world, so I have the tendency of doing nothing and enjoying the fruits of the hard work of other people, because there's no boundary about climate change. Right? So that makes the problem very difficult. But nevertheless, we have success before, like the Montreal Protocol dealing with ozone problem, like the whaling, right? Forbidding countries to kill the whales. Unfortunately, Japan has pulled out from that, the international agreement. We have air pollution of transboundary, cross-boundary air pollution and so on. So these are basically dealt with successfully in the international community. And unfortunately, as I mentioned, climate change is 100 times more complicated. Right? For the case of Montreal Protocol dealing with ozone depleting chemicals, as long as we can find a replacement, then all the problems are solved. Right? But in climate change, we are dealing with a change of our civilization. Our civilization is based on fossil fuel for more than 200 years. We enjoy the benefits of using that fossil fuel. But at the same time, we now realize that we have to pay our bill because we damage our environment, we damage the climate system, right? So this is changing the civilization altogether. So this is much, much difficult. But all the same, we have to do something, right, about that. So we start more than a quarter of a century ago, called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and which is a framework convention, a high theoretical or the framework. And then we come to something more practical with the Kyoto Protocol, right? So this is a protocol which tells which country to do what, how much carbon dioxide you should reduce. But unfortunately, this is a failure. And we all know that George W. Bush, the younger Bush, pulled US out from the Kyoto Protocol. Exactly the same, 16 years later, Donald Trump pulled out from Paris Agreement, right? So this is something political. It becomes, it's very difficult for the whole world to act in concert. And then we have the Copenhagen Climate Summit, which is, people expect a lot from that climate summit because we are going to come up with a new sort of international agreement to replace the Kyoto Protocol. We hope that something is going to be good coming out because of various reasons, because of time constraint. I cannot go on in details. In particular, there's a thing called Climategate. There is a plot to discredit the entire science, climate science. And the plot was successful. You can search for Climategate and know what's it about. It's about an email server in one university in UK was hacked, and then some of the emails were taken out and then exposed to the public out of context. And then they employ some people who are good in their writing. They buy those people called co-ed writers and discredit the climate scientists, right? So the entire global climate summit or negotiation is based on the foundation of good science. Now, if the science itself is discredited, is not deliverable, how can we go on to carry out the discussion? So this is a complete failure. But one thing that comes out good from the Copenhagen summit is that it come to realize that because of the big schism that I talked about between different countries like US and China, it's better to use a bottom-up approach. And that is exactly the approach used in the 2015 Paris summit. So briefly go through that. This is because of a lot of people have goodwill, including President Obama. They strike the deal before the Paris talk. This is in 2014. The Paris Agreement is 2015. And then President Xi strike a deal with French President, with the Prime Minister of India, and so on and so on. Right? So a lot of goodwill took place in 2014. And then of course we have the Pope, who issued an encyclical urging all Christians, all Catholics in the world to concern about climate change. So a very good atmosphere was sort of created, which is favorable and conducive for fruitful Paris Agreement. So that was the first agreement. I'm not going into detail. But just to give you an idea that the Paris Agreement is just a starting point. Because the scientists tells us we should restrict the temperature to here. For the Paris Agreement, it is 2 degrees, all right? But we should spend all efforts to limit the rise of temperature to 1.5. We're now here. So you know that if we want to sort of meet the aspiration of the Paris Agreement, we have a very small margin. Now let's go back to the Paris Agreement. One important approach is the bottom-up approach, which means that each country who signed the Paris Agreement will need to have something called the intended nationally determined contribution. So, for example, US or China, they judge for themselves how much they can contribute to climate action, how much carbon dioxide reduction emission can they achieve. And then no one forces you to do anything, all right? So they make a pledge, I'm going to reduce by that amount. Now, based on that amount, then it is quite likely that the temperature will rise to here, 2.9. So we want our temperature to be here, but instead, according to the pledges of the countries, it should be here. And according to policies, because a country make a pledge, and then the policy may not align with the pledge. All right, based on the policies, then the temperature would rise probably to 3.2. So this is not optimistic at all. All right, Paris Agreement as an initial pledge will take us from here to there. This is disastrous. So that's why next year is going to be very important, because all countries will be revising their NDC or intended NDC. Because every 5 years there is a mechanism where the countries will revise, taking into consideration the current situation and all the technological advancement and so on. So it takes maybe, this is shifted somewhat, about most pessimistically, it takes about 10 years for us to reach 1.5 degrees. Right? Or maybe 20 years, because science is uncertain. So we have only very limited time ahead of us. I'll skip that one. Okay, this slide is about the course of climate actions. Donald Trump withdrew from Paris Agreement because he said that it will cost the US $3 trillion by 2040, and then it will lose 2.7 million jobs, so like that. And of course, there is an agenda for Donald Trump. Because before he became president, he pledged to pull off from the Paris Agreement, disregard of the scientific evidence of himself. So that kind of data, which seems very alarming, which seems very hurtful to a certain country, is actually based on a biased report published by a think tank called NERA, N-E-R-A, in the search for what NERA is. That think tank was actually funded by the fossil fuel industries. All right, so that think tank come up with a report based on wrong assumptions. And one of the worst thing about that report is that it didn't take care into consideration something we call externality. What is externality? Externality is that if I use coal for power generation, then it produces air pollution, right? Air pollution hurts not just our health, but also our economy, because the government needs to build more hospitals, more people are sick, they have to be hospitalized and so on and so on. So this can be translated into economic loss. That report didn't take care of the externality at all. So this is not a fair or good reference. But instead, a report published by a group of scientists in Stanford last year say that if we don't do anything, we will lose the GDP by 30% by the end of the century. But if we take active climate action, it will cost us only 0.1% of GDP. Now you might have the sort of suspicion that 0.1% of GDP is so small. Is that true? And of course, in that study here, it takes into account the co-benefit of climate change action. So what is co-benefit? Because if we do away with coal, if we do away with oil altogether, then the air will be clean, right? We have no health problem whatsoever. If we do away with dirty energy, we have secured our energy in the future, because coal and fossil fuel and oil has a limited reserve. But sooner or later we will run out. We are running out of coal and oil. But if we do away with coal and oil, we use clean energy and so on, then we solve the energy issue altogether. So I'm not going to do that. And this is a health problem published by a very authoritative journal, Health Journal Lancet. So this tells us that using nuclear is best in terms of the health consequences. If we use coal, oil, coal, lignite, which is worst kind of coal, then it will create a lot of people dying, a lot of people sick. This is about death. This is about people sick. So this is some kind of reference you can take when you consider what kind of energy you should choose in the future. Go nuclear. Well, this is just one example. What I want to say is that if we really want to solve the problem, right now, we don't have a single technology that can deal with it. We don't have a silver bullet. We have to use all methodologies available, all right? But I believe in the future, the ultimate solution lies with technology. So there are people who are working hard in those kind of technology. For example, this TWR, traveling wave reactor, is a nuclear reactor. It's a new one, a totally new concept. And that was actually funded by Bill Gates. And they have all the groundwork done. And all is needed is to try to build a prototype, right? As a matter of fact, Bill Gates has signed a sort of agreement or a memorandum of understanding with China. So China was supposed to build a prototype of this kind of reactor, which is much more efficient, much safer than conventional nuclear reactors and so on. Now, because of the trade war, that has to be scrapped. Right? You cannot transfer this kind of technology from the US to China because of the trade war. So this is sad. And then another thing, which is ITER, is actually a fusion reactor. This is the ultimate solution. If we can succeed in that, we have infinite supply of fuel. This is deuterium or isotope of hydrogen, which is available from water. We have a lot of water in the ocean, all right? So there is no problem about the fuel. All it needs to take is that we have to heat it up to 155 million degrees Celsius. So that is a big technological challenge. But the good news is that in China, in collaboration with Japan and a few other countries, they have succeeded in reaching 100 million degrees Celsius. So it's hopeful. It's hopeful, I don't know how long, maybe 10, 20 years from now, this kind of technology will be available, then everything will be solved. But don't count on that, because if we rely on the technology that is not yet available, we are reckless. Remember one of the slides that I showed you before, right? Because that kind of nuclear fusion technology has been studied and tried to improve for about half a century. And well, I still remember that when I first joined the Hong Kong Observatory, I was sent to UK for training. And then I had the chance to visit one of the research centers about nuclear fusion in Europe. And the scientists told me that this technology should be available in 30 years' time. And that time was 1983. So 30 years means 2012, 2013. So of course the sort of expectation or sort of estimation was wrong. We are still quite far away from this technology to be operational. But we need development of technology. So that's for Hong Kong, but I'm not going because of time's sake. You can go to the Council for Sustainability website. You have all the suggestions or all available options to us here in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong is very peculiar in the sense that we have very limited resources. Right? For the entire history of Hong Kong, we have to rely on outside. Food, water, whatever you name it, energy and so on. So some people suggest that, we should build renewable energy, large-scale renewable energy so that we can be self-sufficient. That is not true. That is not practicable. So we have to be connected. So unfortunately, the public engagement process is concluded, but I hope that you will all pay attention to what is coming out from the Council for Sustainable Development, and hopefully there will be some channels where you can voice your own opinion, because after all, this is your future. This is not just the future of Hong Kong, but the future of the whole world. Thank you very much. So we still have a few minutes.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Personally, I don't mind if you another 15 minutes and then keep on discussion now. But I know that you have another lecture, so ahead. So maybe we won't be able to keep you for so long. So any questions? I expect that now, so maybe I start. So one of two questions that for Professor Leung. So the first thing is that so I want to ask about from the Hong Kong perspective. So we know that you discussed. So we know that some people in Hong Kong or in the world, so they are against. So they know they're skeptical about climate change, and they deny about climate change. So whether it is the consequences, whether it is the impact. So as for the case of Hong Kong, so the people who are skeptical or who are denying the climate change. So we discussed this in the lunch. So what are the main reasons for them to deny it or to be skeptical in the context of Hong Kong? So this is my first question. And the second question is, I think so there are some suggestions already here. So but what is in your opinion? So what would you recommend? So for us, for the Hong Kong people, so that we could deal with the climate change in the case of Hong Kong. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. I'm going to answer very briefly because I don't have a lot of knowledge about the questions. First of all, Hong Kong deniers of climate change. I don't think that it is serious at all. There are a few because they publish their opinion in the newspaper and so on, but they are a very small minority. So climate deniers is not significant at all in Hong Kong. As a matter of fact, there are some polls conducted in Hong Kong a few years ago. The awareness of Hong Kong people about climate change is pretty high actually, something like 90%, so this is very good. And many people believe that climate change is happening, so this is a good sign. But the bad thing about Hong Kong people is that we are not interested about it. We don't seem to be concerned about climate change, despite the fact that we are badly struck by Typhoon Mangkhut last year. And at that time, a lot of people talk about climate change, but a year on, after the event, we seem to have forgotten about that at all. So in Hong Kong, it's not about climate denial. But in other parts of the world, it is, particularly in the US, which is very strange because US is supposed to be the most advanced technologically country in the whole world. But strangely, it is the US who have the most climate deniers. It's actually about politics. Unfortunately, this also applies in Hong Kong because in this sort of public engagement, the government or the council is seeking the views of the public about various approaches that we should use. Of course, enhancing renewable energy is, of course, the right way to do. As a matter of fact, we are gaining some progress in this regard, because I don't know whether you have heard about the FIT sort of program, where if you live in a new territory, you have a flat of your own, you can set up a solar panel at the rooftop, and then during daytime you are in school or your father and parents are working, so you generate a lot of electricity, but you don't use the electricity, so you can sell it to the power company. So this is the concept of FIT. That response is pretty good. I think we now have something like several thousand applications, close to 10,000 applications. So the response is very good. And you can actually make money out of it because the power company gives you a very generous sort of cost or price for your electricity. You know, 1 unit, 1 kilowatt hour of electricity roughly costs you $1. But if you generate your electricity, you can gain maybe $4 or $5. So this is a very good business. You can think about it. So we are moving forward. But unfortunately, the RE, renewable energy potential in Hong Kong is very small. It's very small. There are academics who have studied all kinds of estimates about the maximum amount of renewable we can achieve is something like 10–15%. So this is far, far, far away from decarbonization, because decarbonization, we don't want any carbon dioxide at all, right? So one of the pragmatic approach is to cooperate with nearby regions, which is of course not Japan, not Taiwan, not Philippines. Is Guangdong, is the Greater Bay Area and so on, because the Guangdong area has resources. What are the resources? Land. And they also have more wind energy and so on and so on. All right? So they can build a lot of wind farms along the shore. We don't have a lot of shoreline and so on and so on. So this is what we call regional cooperation. And as a matter of fact, in many focus group meetings, which involve the professionals in Hong Kong, unanimously they agree that we should promote sort of cooperation across the border. But politically, again, this is politics, just like the US. It is difficult to gain the consensus of the Hong Kong people to do that kind of regional cooperation. So this is sad, because after all, life is not all about politics. We have to be concerned about quality of life, whether we are living happily or not. If you worry about air, you worry about food, you worry about water, then there is no quality of life at all. So we have to be pragmatic. But again, the problem is easy to identify, but it's difficult to solve. It's the change of mentality about China, about our cooperation with China. But I can tell you some of my experience. It's not all bad across the border. For example, I have been a sort of advisor to the nuclear power plant in Taipei and Leung for a couple of years. And I am impressed with the way they manage the nuclear power plant. So a lot of people were afraid of nuclear, but a lot of sensible people know that. Well, whether we like it or not, the nuclear power plants will be there. But one benefit of nuclear power plant is that it's basically carbon free. So why don't we reap the benefits, all right, cooperate with China, things like that. So that is something probably you would like to consider. And then the second question is about how we should proceed. As I mentioned, this is a change of our entire civilization. And for us as an individual, it is a change of our behavior. But don't think that our contribution is not significant. Of course, the contribution of an individual is very, very small. But if we multiply that by 7.6 million people in Hong Kong, that will not be small. And one very important thing about individual contribution is that, of course, ideally, it would be very nice to have Hong Kong SARG to have a very good policy to promote all kinds of clean energy and so on and so on. That is very good, because if we have a good policy in place, it will be effective, right? But policy formulation and implementation, we're talking about years, right? Hopefully 3 years, maybe 5 years, then a policy will be implemented. And with this kind of political sort of atmosphere right now, It's very difficult to have a meaningful discussion within the legislative council. It's very difficult to do something for the greater good of Hong Kong people. But individually, if we do something to reduce our own carbon footprint, that impact is immediate. Right? So for example, if you forsake eating beef for a month, then you will reduce the carbon footprint. If, for example, you are planning for a trip in Christmas to somewhere else, well, have a second thought. Should I do that? Should I go around Hong Kong? Because there are a lot of people in Hong Kong with very good scenery. And I know many of my friends who tour for the sake of tourism. It's not really some place that really want to go. It's just that, oh, I want to get out of Hong Kong every now and then. But we have to think that over in the larger context, which is climate change. So there are a lot of things as individuals we can do. Our diet, our consumerism, our sort of eating habits, and so on and so on. So, I'm sure there are a lot of information on this.
Bye. So we still want to, now we have maybe 1 or 2 more minutes. Now if you want to ask, then yeah, this is the time. Any of them?
Thank you for the presentation. As seen from the presentation, it could be observed that the government's action or like local government action is very slow, and it may return to stage 1 once the power is changed, like Obama to Trump, and then everything is changed. So do you think that like for business corporations or like big international business, is it possible for them to take the lead to do such things and be better than the government?
Yeah, definitely. This is actually happening. Happy to say that this is happening. For example, in Hong Kong, you have there is what we call the Business Environment Council, which is actually an NGO promoting environmental protection and promoting protection of climate. They are the members of the largest corporation in Hong Kong, like HSBC, like CLP, like Hong Kong Electric. So they have a lot of large corporations that can contribute significantly in terms of reduction of carbon footprint. Because there is really a lot of things they can do, for example, in purchasing, right? If they have very strange guidelines and rules for the staff to purchase things that they use on a daily basis, and then scrutinize the source, where the source comes from, is it hurting the environment, and so on and so on, they can make a big impact. And also going back to the case of US, although Donald Trump, just like George W. Bush, is unlike Obama, who want to leave a legacy for the US and also for the whole world, for a better climate, they sort of propose policies that is counterproductive in terms of climate action. But we don't need to worry that too much, because there are other states in Hong Kong, notably New York State, California, and a lot of other states in Hong Kong are doing a very good job. But of course, there are other states which are very, very poor and anti-climate. For example, Florida. The governor of Florida is one of the worst governors in the world as far as climate change action is concerned. Because Florida is close to the sea. You know, Miami, which is a very famous city, is suffering from all kinds of problems as a result of sea level rise. But the governor do not allow the civil servant to talk about climate change at all. The term climate change is forbidden for the civil service. So that is ridiculous. So we have some poor states in the U.S., but with some very aggressive states in the U.S. So just like individuals, we can do our own to contribute to that big problem, and corporations, in particular large corporations, can obviously do much more. That's a very good question, by the way. Thank you.
So, anyone? So.